Welcome to Friendly Geordie's podcast presents Shawarma FM. We have a great guest, my favorite guest, and I think pretty soon he'll be your favorite guest too. Dr. Peter Slezak. Dr. Peter Slezak has been on the pod before, so you may remember him from that. If you don't, then this is going to be quite a treat for you. How are you doing, Peter?
Great. I'm very happy to be back with you guys. It's
Thanks
good
for
fun.
coming.
No,
And
I
look
enjoyed
at
it
you
last
with
time.
your Macron look. You know,
Macron.
He's got the aviator glasses. He's got the motorcycle jacket.
It's Marlon Brando.
Yeah,
not,
you're
not,
like-
not Macron.
That's why I come here. I get all this sort of,
Praise. The rebel. You're a rebel.
Yeah.
You've sold us as like this professor who's into philosophy, and you rock up with your aviators, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if he wants to beat us up or not.
We're gonna do a live street fight after. That's part 4. Academics versus blue collar workers.
Dude, Israel versus Palestine.
Who do you want to be?
Okay.
No, thanks for coming back though. We did have a lot of positive comments about the last pod that the initial one that you came on. So there's definitely some interest to have you back. So thanks for coming. And I will not leave this time. There's no
There's no Kendrick Lamar.
there's no Kendrick Lamar to run away to. But yeah, thank you.
We spoke about Israel and Palestine. I don't know, you don't even remember it because you think it was just like a normal conversation. So we'll get into that, but like we'll talk about some other stuff that you're interested in. But let's start with, do you have any observations about the current political situation?
Oh, Jesus. What kind of a question is that?
I mean, I'll tell you. I'll go into exact details.
Be a bit more specific.
Okay, this is a political podcast, and mostly not mostly, but a lot of times what we talk about is the current government dispensation. Who's going to form government, who isn't. So currently, today there was a Nationals leadership spill. I don't know if you follow. David Littleproud is still the Nationals leader. Do you have any observations about the split in the coalition?
Look, I see it like all of you on the news, but the thing that struck me a little bit was that, if I remember rightly, Littleproud and his colleagues were the only ones that were saying what I thought was the decent thing. They dissented from, what was it that they objected to? There was a particular issue that they, I think, took the principled stand on. The Liberals and Labor were in cahoots. What was it now? I'm going
The
blank.
anti-Semitism bill, is that what you're referring to?
No.
Free speech. No.
What was it? They objected about some particular line that they were being forced into. I'm going blank on what it was, but I remember thinking that they were the only ones that actually, surprisingly, as much as I don't share the view of,
The Nats.
but they actually took a principled position. I wish my brain wasn't blank right now about what it was. That was impressive, though. They disagreed with Susan Lee about what. Remind me, what was it that you've forgotten this too?
It wasn't about the laws.
Was it about the anti-Semitism bill that was recently
Wasn't
introduced?
specifically that, was it?
Or was it the? It's all tied into also sort of like protest. There's something about reducing the ability to protest.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be blank about that, but I remember
okay.
the issue impressed me that they were the ones that took a principled stand, and they were seen as the outliers.
So I gather you're not a big fan of the current government.
Oh, Jesus, that's putting it mildly.
Okay.
I mean, that's putting it mildly. Look, Albanese and Wong are basically, what's the word? Complicit. They've been up to their necks in supporting a genocide.
Okay, I know this is a very central issue to you, and I understand that it is to a lot of people. But if we keep that issue aside,
yeah, that's like saying we're talking about Hitler. Let's keep aside the Second World War and the Holocaust.
Talk about his art.
but we're not talking about Hitler. We're talking about a government that may be supporting, in your sense, an authoritarian government overseas. And let's be real, there are some political compulsions that make you go towards that. But in terms of everyday lives of ordinary Australians, what do you think about that? Their economic policy or their other social policies?
Look, I wish I was with some of my better informed friends, even on that score, that I think, for example, we're not taxing people highly enough. We're giving away a lot of our resources, our minerals, our oil companies and mineral companies are not taxed enough. I mean, people who I admire, who understand much more about this, are telling me stuff that is pretty shocking about the way this government is, for example, allowing private schools to get all sorts of subsidies when they don't need it. This is not a government that you'd regard as appropriately, what would you say, progressive in a way. I mean, I think the model, if you're talking about Labor governments, was always Whitlam and how progressive he was on a lot of important issues. I mean, he was flawed like everybody, but that was, I think, the high point of progressive politics in Australia. And those sorts of policies, he made university education free.
But he also left, so he was kicked out in a very historic way, which also is a reminder to every politician that enters that if you start straying towards that line, such as talking about resources, that they're going to kick you out. And I think,
right. But why was he kicked out, and how was he kicked out?
Well, yes. Well, I think now, I'm sure there's some people that still have doubts about it, but now I think most of our audience believes that it was a CIA orchestrated coup.
Well, they're probably right.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's interesting evidence. Kerr was having an enormously rich correspondence with intelligence agencies. There was actually a CIA agent called Boyce. I remember this quite well. He was in jail. And he said, if you think what we did in Chile when they undermined the Allende government, which was the CIA coup, he said, if you think we were doing bad things in Chile, look what we're doing in Australia.
Really?
He said that.
Is that what he said?
That was a CIA guy. And the head of the CIA at the time was a guy called Colby, who was a really bad guy. Now, I mean, look, I'm cautious about conspiracy theories, but the Whitlam thing, there's more to it than meets the eye. And I think people like Pilger, the Australian journalist, he wrote a lot about that. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, this is just bullshit that you'd make up because you're kind of crazy.
What do you make of, because I work with a lot of blue collar folks, and one of the guys was saying, I brought this up with Ali, what was how Whitlam ended up borrowing money from the Pakistani?
There was some guy called Kemlani that went around with some very shady deals.
Yes, a bank. Yeah. What do you make of that? Because that is something that a lot of people criticize. People that criticize him point to that, saying, well, that is an outright example of corruption and taking money from a nefarious international.
I do want to. Should I raise this issue? It is a bias issue. That particular bank that you're talking about is my great uncle's bank.
Extra dodgy.
Yep. So that did go down. I don't know if you remember this, but the bank was called BCCI back in the day. It was a bank, and then they got in for money laundering.
What did the initials stand for?
I will look it up.
But
it closed down. Like a lot of them, like my family. But
then
they went to jail, bro.
Crazy. But Ali's point was that Whitlam he had his hands tied. He didn't actually have access to government money, so he went to other means to be able to.
That was part of that scandal. That there was some shonky business deals that this guy made, and who knows?
There were a lot of jonky, because I know that's from. So by the way, it was called Bank of Credit and Commerce International back in the day. Anyway, they were doing some, because I have some inside knowledge of this. They definitely were. So this was just when Middle East started making a lot of 1974 was the Yom Kippur War, which led to the oil prices shooting up worldwide, and that meant a lot of Arab rich sheikhs had a bunch of money that they wanted to put in, and that's where my great uncle came in, and he went hard, and then he fizzled out because he was doing some illegal stuff as well.
Yeah.
But my family does not agree. My family thinks he's a martyr, dude. Don't bring it up with them.
I can't believe that. That's a crazy connection.
Because a lot of people in my family, so particularly the older generation, he gave them jobs. So they were just students, and then this one guy in the family becomes owner of the largest bank or whatever, and then all of a sudden these guys are like, you want to go to Switzerland? You want to get posted over there? You want to? So they were in on it, and then they eventually went to jail as well as a result. But anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about all that stuff. That's a bit obscure.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, look, we'll move away from the Whitlam stuff, particularly because we've covered it a lot in the past as well.
True.
I actually wanted to bring up, because last time when you were here, you mentioned Socrates as one of your major influences, and you said that you had written a play on the trial. Do you want to, for the audience that might not know anything about Socrates except for that he was a Greek philosopher, would you like to give us a little intro into who he was?
Well, everybody who studies philosophy has to read, or at least finds out something about Socrates. He was the great founder of Western philosophy in a sense. It was Plato, actually. Plato, who was his student. Socrates didn't write anything. He had a school, and Plato was one of the students. And
he was like a prophet-like figure, right? Where he didn't write himself, but his students later on
well, he
sort of
taught,
made
and
the
he
thing.
had a very controversial, provocative style of teaching. And Plato wrote this all up, and he wrote it up in the form of dialogues. They were like accounts of the interactions, the debates. And Socrates is presented as this provocative teacher who provoked arguments, but he provoked them with what we'll call then the sophists. The sophists were what today you regard as the people who take money for giving advice, the legal advisors who maybe don't have too many scruples and will advise you how to run a business, but they are not necessarily principled. And so sophistry is now used in that way as a kind of a pejorative term.
And Socrates was really against that. He said that he does not trust anyone that gets paid
Right.
Well,
for
it
their
was
opinion.
the payment was just an indication of the fact that these people weren't doing it out of principle. They weren't teaching truth and justice for the sake of the principles.
Yeah.
They were getting paid to give advice. And this is like you'd hear, I don't know, management consultants today that are doing it to make profits rather than seeking the truth. Now, the beauty of the stories, the dialogues that Plato presents is Socrates is presented as this heroic, noble figure that stands for truth and justice and for clarity in arguments and logic and reasoning. And the dialogues show him arguing with the sophists and how he runs rings around them and exposes them for their corruption and their intellectual depravity. And it's very entertaining stuff, but it's got a moral message, intellectual message. So the point of the whole story is
what's the intellectual message?
integrity, honesty in argument, reasoning with logic rather than just making clever arguments that will win an argument that are fake or false. He cared about arguments that are correct, to reason logically rather than just using tricks to win an argument. So that's what you see him debating with these people. That they're smartasses. They try to win by all sorts of rhetorical, clever tricks that are not arguing honestly or rationally, because they're arguments, and they go through the arguments, and you see that Socrates is really teaching logic, teaching how to reason, and it's very inspiring. That's why every philosophy student gets to read some of the Plato dialogues, because they're a bit sort of long-winded. I'll get back to that in a minute, but there's a fundamental intellectual story there that he's standing for intellectual integrity and reasoning and truth, and the sophists are the shysters. They're
Right.
the ratbags, and he exposes them. But they're the ones that are, first of all, they would charge the students fees. Socrates taught anybody for free. That was the beauty of it. He would be surrounded by students, and he would teach for free.
Wait, was Socrates the guy that lived in like a giant, like, pot or something? Who was the guy in the story where he just lived almost like a homeless person?
Oh, that's a different guy.
That's not Socrates?
That's not Socrates.
Who was the guy who, and then when Alexander the Great came up to him, he said, I'll grant you any wish, and he said, get out of the sun, you're in my sun.
I don't know that story.
That's the guy.
They didn't teach me that story.
Is that not Socrates?
Maybe it might not be true, but it's definitely
never
not
heard that
Socrates.
about Socrates.
Okay, that's not him then. My mistake. Someone else.
But there's some other, Aristophanes, I think, wrote a play about Socrates, but the majority of what we know about Socrates comes from Plato's dialogues, and he's portrayed in this heroic way. Now, the point of the story, which is very important, it's really political, really. Look, in the end, Socrates was put to death by the state.
Wow.
And the charges against Socrates, which is this wonderful irony, is that he was not teaching the gods of the state, the official dogmas, the doctrines that were the government's line. He was not teaching the gods of the state, which is a metaphor. I mean, it's also literal. He wasn't teaching the official religious doctrines, but that's a metaphor for not teaching the propaganda that the government wanted you to teach.
Right.
But also, the charge against him was corrupting the youth.
Corrupting, right.
Now, that goes back to some of the conversations we've had before. See, what does it mean, corrupting the youth? It means he was teaching them to think for themselves.
Okay,
And that's the worst
can
crime.
I step in? Because I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about philosophy, but I do know a little bit about politics. And just to put the context of this time, because corrupting the youth can just be abstract, but there's a very political relevance. I think you might go into it. But the Peloponnesian Wars had just happened. Athens was defeated, and Sparta had set up a puppet government in Athens. And they ruled for, I want to say a few months. It wasn't a long rule. And what they wanted at the time was to get rid of democracy. This is what I've read. You can tell me if I'm wrong. That they wanted to get rid of democracy, and they wanted to have like a kleptocratic sort of a system. Now, the people that were invoking this, they were called 33 something. I can't remember exactly. But these people had basically come up with the insurrection and ruled, and then were disposed. Now, these people were taught by Socrates. So the idea of corrupting youth has the political relevance of, well, the people that you taught literally put us under anarchy. This was their point of view. Put us through anarchy, brought their own crazy Spartan ideas, which, by the way, Socrates, you're also promoting because you're going against Athenian democracy. Anyway, so that was the context. So they were petrified of him.
Yes, look, that's right. I don't know that part well, but I remember it. I think Plato went to Syracuse or somewhere, and he decided to get out of there, and he abandoned that political, corrupt system. So that's a part of the background of the stories. But in a way, that's independent of the significance of the dialogues and the message that comes through from them. And, of course, it's not an accident that they finally put Socrates to death.
Well, how did they kill him?
He was given the hemlock, famously.
What's that?
Hemlock is a poison. It's a plant. There's a hemlock plant, and you drink it, and it kills you. And funny, when I was a student, I didn't do my homework until the night before the exam. And I remember reading this, and there he is in the cell, and all his friends are around him, and he takes the hemlock, and he starts to get numb, and he covers his face, and they think he's dead, and they're all crying. And then he pops up, and he says, "Don't forget to sacrifice a rooster, a cock, to the god Asclepius." And then he died. And that was a joke.
That was what he should have been teaching.
No.
Oh.
Asclepius was the god of health. And he made a little joke just before he died. Now, I remember I'm reading this the night before my exams. I'm sitting there studying for exams, and I've got tears in my eyes. I'm reading this. Wow. It's a very moving story.
Yeah,
but the reason it's moving is because Socrates is an inspiring figure. They loved him because of his teachings. And he was and by the way, part of the story, I'll tell you about the play that I've tried to put together. But part of the dialogues, the famous one is called the Apology. It's not really an apology. It's Socrates in the court and his testimony, and how he throws back at the accusers, the people that accused him of corrupting the youth, and he explains what he was doing and why he has a following. And it's the most inspiring speech to throw back the charge at the society that is corrupt and is getting rid of the one dissident critical voice. And that's why I keep repeating my line on this is, the way I like to think about it is that Socrates was the Chomsky of Athens. He was the one that was exposing the corruption of the intellectuals or the ruling class and the thinkers, the sophists. They were the kind of paid philosophers, and he's exposing them for their corruption and their depravity and their intellectual lapses. And so, of course, he was put to death. And you know who cited this? John Stuart Mill, in his famous essay on liberty. He mentions the case of two cases in history which we should remember for their outrageous immorality. One was Socrates, and the other one was Jesus. And he talks about them as comparable. He says that it's in later generations we look with horror back at what these people did, because now we see that they put to death the greatest. In fact, the last words of the dialogue, I think Crito, who was his friend, said, and this is how he died, the man who was the greatest and the most noble of all of us. That's sort of words. Well, that's the story of Socrates and why it's an important message today.
In fact, and one more, I think, I don't know if you didn't mention this, I think, but he was offered exile, right?
Yes, that's right, and he didn't take it.
And he didn't take it.
Really?
And so there's a view that he actually died for the principle.
That's right.
To show that they'll kill you. If you
not only
speak
that,
the truth.
not only that, you're quite right. It's good that you mentioned that.
That's tough.
He was offered, because they didn't really want to kill him, and they were willing to exile him for life. But he said that this is the system, and he is remaining consistent or honouring the system that he's part of. And in any case, he had another philosophical reason. It's rather funny. His friends were all crying that he's going to die, and he says, hey, guys, hey, listen, don't be upset. You have to understand some of Plato's philosophies. But Plato had this idea that this is not the real world, that we plop into this world. Our soul, he thought, comes from what you might call Plato's heaven. There's what's called the world of forms. It's where the truth really is. It's another world. And your mind, your soul, is really in that world before you're born. And then you see all the truths of mathematics and of science. And when you get born, your soul appears in a body and you forget everything. And the life of learning, when you're studying philosophy and learning, you're trying to remember. It's called anamnesis, the doctrine of remembering. So learning is not learning, it's really recalling what you knew, what your soul knew. So when you've got that idea of where your soul came from and where it's going, he says to his friends, don't cry for me, my friends. I'm returning to where I've always tried to go as a philosopher to discover the truth. I'm now going back to reality where all the truth is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he has this idea that his soul is now going to be released and will go back to the world of truth and reality.
Dare I say, that's a bit Islamic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is
philosophy
kind
around
of
it.
religious.
Even that's why, when if someone converts to Islam, they don't call them converts, they call them reverts. Because they came back. Same idea that you were always born like that.
Yeah, it's a nice story.
Interesting, yeah.
How old was he?
He was in his 70s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a wonderful story.
There's also another conspiracy. I don't know if it's a joke or if it's real, but they say that Socrates kind of wanted to die. He said that old age gets really tough.
He was like,
It was like, I'm 70 years old.
There's another dialogue where he's talking to a bunch of old guys in Athens, and they're all making jokes about old age and stuff. But it's only in this sense. In fact, one of the terms that's been used, I think, in the dialogues is learning to die. I mean, the course of his life as a philosopher was learning to die. That's the metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to accept that view, but you can see the logic of it given what he thought where knowledge comes from.
What are your views on Socrates' take on democracy? And how
he didn't believe in democracy.
He didn't believe in democracy. How do you reconcile with that? First of all, do you believe in democracy? Do you believe in his ideas?
Well, of course. Well, let me explain. Let me answer your question. It's a good question. For a long time, people didn't pay attention to that part of Socrates, but the guy who brought this to attention was the philosopher Karl Popper. And during the war, in about the 1940s, he actually came to New Zealand. They didn't give him a job in Australia, the greatest philosopher of the time. And he went to New Zealand. And during the war, his war effort was to write 2 books. One of them was on Plato, and the other one was on Marx, actually. And he was very critical of both of them. But your question's a really good one, because he said that people didn't notice that the dialogues of Plato are actually a blueprint for a totalitarian society. And Socrates' vision was that it would be highly stratified, and people would be brainwashed effectively into accepting their station in life. And there were certain people at the bottom, and they had to be told certain lies and certain myths about how the society is. So he had this really totalitarian vision of how society should run effectively. And the phrase, I haven't thought about this for a long time, but the rulers are the kings are the philosophers. The rulers are the philosophers. So basically they were the dictators.
Right.
Now, whether that's a good model or not, but mind you, we were being run by a bunch of idiots. Maybe that would be better.
But at the time they were also being run by a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know the political context of this. They were looking at, it was actually kind of like what America is right now. It's an overextended empire that's becoming a bully. And so they were just going around knocking little islands.
And your history before that you mentioned, which I'm only vaguely remembering, was part of the motivation. He thought that philosophers, at least, are the ones that are wise and ought to be able to see things more clearly and rule wisely.
I mean, they ended up sentencing him to death, so he kind of proved his point.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way. And the bizarre thing about him being sentenced to death is that there was 2 counts. There was one, was there an offense, and the other one was what the punishment should be, death or whatever?
Yes, they had 2 moments in the trial. It's all in the dialogues there.
Yeah.
And they first, I think, suggested to Socrates a possible punishment. And the normal procedure would be that you suggest something that they regard as serious. And he said some trivial thing. In fact, he said, you should put me up in an expensive hotel and take care of me for the rest of my life. He was being a smartass. He told them, and you know why he said that? Because you need me, he said to them. He said, you need me as he used the equivalent of the gadfly, the critic, that I'm the one that is forcing you to confront the ideas and the truths and the difficulties. That was the whole point of the dialogues. That's why I mentioned he's arguing with all the smart guys and showing that they're all fucked, they're all full of shit. And he says, you need me. Now that's in fact a very important insight. That's why I make the joke that he was the Chomsky of Athens, because Chomsky is got a very similar role in life. And of course they hate him for that. The authorities hate him. He's pointing out their corruption and their all their misleading, the way the propaganda, and in fact, intellectuals are the worst Orwell wrote about that too. So this is a common theme in history, and Socrates was guilty of exposing the intellectual class, the rulers, for their corruption, and of course teaching it to the youth.
Speaking of common themes, I'm noticing a common theme here as well. You're into Socrates, you're into Galileo. Are you looking to get executed by the state? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
I mean, you're shitting on Albo as soon as you come in, and then...
Look, it's a good question you're asking. So if it's a very funny question. No, I tell you how, in fact, my personal history is kind of relevant to your question. When I was 16, I was doing a science degree. I started a science degree. I started a bit young. And I remember finding myself in the library at Sydney University, in Fisher Library. I must have seen a television show with the philosopher Bertrand Russell. And my parents or somebody said, he's a smart guy. And then I found a book of Russell's in the library. This is relevant to your question. It was on science and religion. I still remember, a little brown book. Mm-hmm. And I started reading Russell. And I was inspired as a 16, 17-year-old with this dissident, famous philosopher. He was famous for his logic, and he was the most famous philosopher in those days, in the 70s. And when I was reading him, he was saying things that nobody was saying. It was a contrarian view of the world. Now, it's not an accident that in later life, these connections that you make, I gravitated towards certain ideas and certain people. And later in life, it's not an accident that when I became a great fan of Chomsky's work, Chomsky on his office wall always had a big picture of Bertrand Russell. I didn't know that. Yeah. He admired him for his intellectual achievements, but also his moral position. Now, Russell, of course, to go back to your question, Russell was put in jail for his dissent. He was a conscientious objector to the First World War. He objected later in his life to the Vietnam War. He wrote enormous amount of political, critical stuff, as did Chomsky later. So there's an interesting, in hindsight, a retrospective connection, and that's why I see Socrates as a hero in that same tradition. Mm. And that's why I'm interested in even putting on a play today about Socrates, and because it's really telling the story that I think today is so relevant.
Do you think there's a rebellious sort of streak in these figures, or it's just trying to portray objective truths?
It's both of those. They go together. If you can think for yourself, then you find out that you're being swamped with lies and bullshit from people in authority. And it's actually quite difficult to think. But that's true even in my discipline in philosophy, which is not only political, but thinking independently is very difficult. And actually, Chomsky has a wonderful phrase. He says, you have to learn intellectual self-defense. You have to learn how to defend yourself against the brainwashing, the propaganda. It's not easy.
No.
And the tendency is to fall in with the main streams of thought. Now, actually, in science, it's very similar.
It's not just falling in, because from our work, I can tell you one thing. When you do something like this and you interact with audiences and you're looking to get as many people to watch you, very quickly you realize what the recipe is. Like you know exactly what the demographics are, what opinion they're looking for, and if you give them that, you'll get a lot of following. So Socrates is almost inspirational for me to just remind myself it doesn't matter. Even if no one is listening to me, I have to say what I feel is true. Which is why we were like, sometimes we get a lot of audience that would criticize us for an opinion. I was telling Miss, I was like, worst, we won't do this. We'll do something else, but we cannot change.
Yeah, you can't
just say
out your principles.
Yeah. Well, that's a very important point you're making, and that's the difficulty, because the pressure is enormous. And we all grew up with the stories of different political regimes where conforming is easier. And people don't, I've thought a lot about this and read a lot of the psychology. People don't even realize that they're conforming. There's a famous, let me tell you quickly, a famous experiment. Who was the fellow who did it? I'll have to think of his name in a minute. He puts 3 lines on a screen, and one is shorter and the other ones are longer. And he has a whole group of subjects, apparently, but they're all stooges for the experimenter except one, the last one. And he asks everybody, which is the shortest line? And everybody says the wrong one. The last person ends up saying what everybody else has said.
Pressure,
and he can see for his own eyes.
Yeah.
Now, they're not lying. Their mind is influenced by the majority. There's a lot of literature.
But you know what the worst aspect about that experiment is? Not that he conformed to peer pressure then, but later on, he didn't even remember that that his answer was different.
Really?
So he just remembered, oh yeah, we all unanimously thought that was it.
Right.
And that's why, actually in legal studies, eyewitness testimony started getting questioned a lot.
There's a lot of good literature about that. There's another book by a guy called, I forgot his second name now. He wrote about a Nazi Battalion 101 in Ukraine during the Second World War. And he tells the story about how one of the German officers, the commander, got orders from Berlin to shoot all of these prisoners, that they had the civilians. And he was very upset about the order. And his name is Browning. The author is Browning, Christopher Browning. And he tells the story about how the commander was in tears. He was very upset about this order, having to kill all these civilians. So he told his soldiers, look, anybody who doesn't want to do this should step out of line and there won't be any punishment. I don't know how many soldiers there were. They all had to line up and shoot all these people. Hardly anybody stood out of line. And when they were asked why, they didn't want to step out of line from all their comrades. They didn't want to it's not betray, but to what's the word I'm looking for? To be a dissident voice, or to not be part of the crowd. That's another example of conformism for all the worst reasons. Now, we grew up, there's a whole literature, of course, in the past about people who go along with the worst things.
I'm going to be honest, philosophers and poets are to blame for a lot of it. Like, in order to convince someone to do that, which is ignore mass atrocities that you don't have to be from a particular culture. Like, certain things you can morally tell are like bad, but you need some kind of philosopher, you need some kind of poet to convince you that there's a greater good behind this.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
No, because we'll get on to what's going on today. It's a bit shocking. Ordinary people are capable of this blindness to what's in front of their eyes. I'm a bit shocked by that. I haven't seen it as badly as I'm seeing it today. And Hannah Arendt, famously, she was the Jewish woman who covered the trial of Eichmann, who was one of the Nazi leaders who was responsible for, part of the final solution of the Jews. And she used this phrase which became famous, the banality of evil. The idea was that she was maybe wrong about him, but this is a famous phrase where later people thought she misread him. But she made this interesting claim that he wasn't a smart guy, he wasn't thinking for himself, he was just going along and following orders, as they say. And she used the phrase banality of evil to mean this wasn't a deep thinker, he was just doing what was required of him. And I think about that because I think of the evil that I see around me today. They're not driven by philosophers, they're driven by the propaganda and not thinking independently. But it's very hard now to avoid the open evidence that's in front of your eyes on your iPhone.
But would you agree that there is a story behind it? Maybe there's no particular philosopher or religious leader, but there's always a story which usually involves how they've been screwed over.
There's a narrative. But the question that you're asking is a very interesting one, because the question is, how can you reconcile what you see with your own eyes with the narrative you've been given? How can you convince yourself that I don't know now how many thousands upon thousands of civilians and children deserve to be killed for what? Now, people have convinced themselves. I'm talking about people I know.
Yeah.
I'm going through this a lot right now, where I'm talking to people that are indifferent to the immense tragedy of essentially genocide. Children, the horrifying, really shocking stuff that you see if you're paying attention. It's hard to avoid it. See, that's the point. Now, people are indifferent to it. There's something going on.
Don't you think it's ideology? Because if you can justify something.
That's right, exactly. It is, but that's the point that you're making.
Yeah.
You fill your head with some stuff that enables you to ignore an enormous amount of suffering that you're seeing. You've dehumanized these people. It's not news. This is Orwell wrote about it. It's like every war we do this.
It is Orwell.
How can you go fighting and killing children in Vietnam? The famous cases of My Lai and so on. How are people capable of that? Well, I see it now. People around me are indifferent, contemptuous of
it's like the other. Or the unknown.
Exactly. Now, I was old enough to be during the Vietnam War, but we didn't see it live on our phones and our screens. And I'm watching this and I'm a bit horrified because they're accepting a degree of moral depravity that I can't quite get my head around it.
Well, the irony now is not that only you're witnessing it, but you also can't say anything about it.
Increasingly. And that's the other, you're right, that's the other part of it. We're now, condemning.
They used to tolerate us back in the day. I mean, you had a job, so you could have been fired. I was just a student. So, like, you know, they would talk, but now it's kind of, they're making it an offense.
They're making it offensive now to say certain slogans. It's ridiculous. It's a totalitarian, fascist imposition on us in our own democratic system. It's being undermined. Of course, people are protesting now. They're trying to resist this, but it's happening around us right now. In America, it's much worse. The ICE people are running around like the brown shirts, the Nazis.
What are your views on that? The ICE
It's pretty crazy.
Protest.
It's shocking. America has sunk into what is openly being compared to the Nazi regime. There are important differences, but we haven't seen this before. The idea that you've got a paramilitary group of people running around unmarked, in masks, beating up, shooting, arresting people, disappearing people, this is very different. This is a fascist regime, and I mean, we've never seen this.
You know what's even scarier? I was reading this, I think it was on the ABC, that leftist and left progressive gun societies are increasing membership at a record rate.
Wait, what's increasing?
So Democrats usually were considered less into guns.
Oh,
Democrats and people on the left are buying guns at record
to protect themselves.
Yeah, they're saying that if ICE is going to come into our areas, then the Second Amendment applies to all Americans, and we have a right to bear arms.
I'm sure that's the right conclusion to draw from all this. More guns in America is hardly the solution.
But I mean, I know it's not a solution. It's also a very scary thing because, you have these armed societies. But when you are facing tyranny, then do you believe in protection and self-defense?
Well, yeah, of course you have to, but
because I look at it and I don't. Look, I'm not a gun person. I've never owned a gun. I think I've shot it once, like hunting or whatever. But if I was in America and I was seeing all of this, I would start thinking about it too. Because you got to understand, it's not like Australia. Everyone has guns over there. You're the only one that doesn't.
Yeah, but having more guns, I don't think is the answer. I mean, I thought about this when I was living there in America for 4 years during the 70s, and there was a movie, I can't remember what it was. It was set, Charles Bronson. He walked around shooting people because his wife got beaten up and murdered, I think, by a mugger. And in those days, mugging was a very serious risk. And when I got there, the week I got there, the professor of philosophy was murdered in his apartment.
What?
And another one, no, the professor that murdered that week, the first week, was killed outside the gates of the university.
Oh, my God. Professor
Wolfgang Friedman, I remember his name, is a professor of law. He was held up at knife point by one of the muggers, and he refused to give his watch, and they stabbed him to death.
Jesus.
And that was the first week I got there. A professor of philosophy was killed in his apartment sometime later.
Oh, my God.
This was a war zone.
Was this in Boston?
No, this is New York City.
Oh, New York.
I lived in the Upper West Side, and that was pretty hairy. In fact, I had a friend, a cousin, uncle, I think he was. He lived in the Bronx. That was really
that would have been super
the worst.
crazy. Yeah.
So I was there, and now the point was that Charles Bronson in this movie, whatever it was called, was going around provoking muggers to try him, and he would shoot them. And I remember thinking what you just said. Look, New York, I mean, I was married, I had my wife, and you think you got to protect yourself against these crazies. Should I get a gun? I actually went through this thought process. I mean, I didn't. And usually people are shot by their own gun, so I don't think it's a good...
Is that right?
Yeah.
You're more likely to be killed by your...
Are you serious?
I mean, whenever you have a suicidal thought, it's
not only that, people will take your gun. I think having a gun is not a solution.
Okay,
but you know that your question is a good one. You start to thinking, how do I protect myself? And I don't think that was it. Well, in the end, they've solved that problem. They got... New York is a different place now. You can walk through Harlem now.
Oh, now it's...
You couldn't walk through Harlem before.
But you also have to understand that a lot of the people that are supposedly supporting this tyranny in America, the supporters of the current government, they're heavily armed, and their entire, it's not just they're armed, their entire worldview is about how armed to the teeth they are. And so if there is a situation where there's some kind of confrontation, do you really want to be, this is no good solution. Arming, I think that people shouldn't be armed.
That's not the solution. Look what's going on. It's basically the erosion of civil liberties. They're shooting dead people who are in any way protesting. These ICE people are going around, they're shooting people in the head for no reason. Now that's becoming a big...
now, the last one that they shot, the nurse, they actually had a confrontation with him before, so they knew him.
Yeah.
Really?
That's why they backed off, and the guys that are on administration, they murdered that man.
Yeah.
They knew him, they hated him, and they found an opportunity. And the opportunity was a bad one because he was unarmed as well. They're taking away his gun.
Right.
And they shot him like 10 times.
Shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
No, the United States is in a very bad way right now.
Yeah.
And my friends are telling me not to go and visit. I mean, I go to conferences and so on. That's for other reasons as well. People now.
I think, yeah.
They will do. I have to go to the bathroom quickly, but they will do a background check on you. And
Oh no, it's worse than that now. You've got to fill out forms about. You've got to hand over all your connections, your emails, and your online.
all your information.
You've got to give them everything.
Apparently, what they do now is they keep your phone on the table, and they say put in your code.
Yeah.
If you don't, we'll arrest you.
Yeah.
You don't have the option.
That's right.
So you unlock it, and then they take it.
Yeah, that's right.
They'll analyze your phone for like maybe an hour, however long it
Seriously?
takes.
Yeah.
They'll look
But
at
you've got to give them
everything.
all your website, your links to all of your Facebook.
Porn as well.
But
I mean,
about your private images?
No.
No, they got everything, dude.
Everything.
And they're going to ask you questions about them too.
I don't want to go to the States then.
You should see the questions now. The so-called ESTA form. It used to be you could just enter without a visa. You filled out a lot of questions. You should see the questions they're asking you now. You've got to give all of the details of who you know and what you're connected to and your emails.
Oh my
They've got access to all your emails.
What?
Yeah. Now go and check what you have to do now to get a.
I gotta pee. I'm so outraged.
Yeah, you should.
I have to pee.
Yeah. No, it's very grim. Now, of course, it depends on what your record is. I can't go to the US just because I'm too visible online, and they just see what I'm up to.
Yeah, it's a tough one, you know. There you hear stories about, I don't know, like, do you have a smartphone? Maybe you'll be able to get away with it.
Do I have a what? A smartphone?
Do you have a phone? Do you post a lot on your phone?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah, I think you probably, maybe now is not the best time.
No.
Not that I was going, but I wouldn't go either. In fact,
But I have a lot of reasons to go. I mean, my academic life was centered in the US, the American conferences, my colleagues, my friends from my university days. I've got a rich life in America.
well, I've got the best solution for you. Do you want to do it in the new age YouTube way? You go there and you hope that they deport you, because when they do, then you can publicly say all of this, and then you get a greater following. So
Oh, that's right.
try
No,
it.
it's a new world. It's a different situation now.
It is, and it is getting draconian. Honestly, it's getting kind of draconian everywhere now.
Well, that's why, to go back to Australia, the rules that they've been spooked into bringing in now, they're now criminalising all sorts of stuff, you know, what you say, slogans, what you wear. You know, I've got a hat that I wear, a baseball hat, and I've got on it a watermelon. That's now going to be, you know, a watermelon.
We're talking about Australia now?
Yeah, we're talking about Australia now.
Seriously?
Well, you know, certain
Well, next time
slogans
someone
now.
says that, you just say, "What? You hate black people?"
What do you mean?
Watermelon is notoriously.
Oh no, that's another joke. No, that's right. But you know the significance of the watermelon. The watermelon has the colours of the Palestinian
Oh no,
flag.
no, yes.
No, we know, yeah. My dad actually is quite,
A watermelon.
well, he's quite passionate about the subject, like yourself, and he's an artist, and he painted his own design about his own sort of watermelon design, but he's quite upset because no one realizes what it is.
It was too subtle.
He's like confiding in me, just being like, I don't know what to do because, you know, people just they don't understand.
He wasn't
what it's
explicit
saying.
enough.
Yeah, and I'm like, Dad, relax. You live in Cremorne.
Well, you can always give him a few slogans that will catch the attention.
Tell him to
immediately.
say from the river to the sea and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is also like you and like I would say, I mean, most people. He's you know, he loves Spinoza. And
good on him.
Yeah, and he loves philosophy, and he's an educated person. I mean, he grew up in
Soviet Union.
Yugoslavia when
you
it was
don't
still
say.
communist. Yeah, and
there you go.
I mean, he left because he really didn't like that. But he has he's kind of, I think, same as like Ali's family for himself. It's like you know, you have parents that are interested in philosophy and they're educated and they put that on you in terms of they try to give you an independent, worldly, analytical perspective of the world.
Sure.
And so he's similar, and I think it's a artistic proclivity to be empathetic and empathize with people on a human level, and then you know what I mean. And then they sort
And
of.
if you like Spinoza, another hero in that group, dissident voice, and you know what happened to Spinoza?
No.
Oh, you don't know the story?
No.
Another one of the heroes in that group that we were talking about. So Spinoza was a very orthodox religious young man, and at one point he was charged with the most blood-curdling accusations by his synagogue, by the rabbis of the synagogue, for his heretical views.
Right.
And I can't remember exactly. It was called a herem, which is in Hebrew. This charge against somebody for I guess you'd call it irreligious. I don't know what you call it. A kind of
Apostasy.
a heretic apostasy. Or
Yeah.
he was regarded as the most immoral human being, and the curses are really funny to read. And it's not clear what actually he did that they were concerned with. So they expelled him from the Amsterdam Jewish community. There's lots of good books written about him by some Jewish philosophers. But he was, again, an independent thinker, and he became famous because afterwards he wrote two of these most famous works in philosophy. But he was... The nice thing about Spinoza was that he didn't believe in the God of the Jews. He was a pantheist. He was kind of like... really an atheist in a way, or didn't believe in God in the traditional sense. And that was a terrible crime.
Right.
So he's another one of these historical figures that is a heroic figure because of his...
Again, the rebellion.
Yeah,
Because
rebellious...
he was a philosopher.
Of course.
Yeah.
He's one of the most important philosophers in history.
See, I need to learn. I need to read more. Unfortunately, my dad gifted me a Spinoza book, but I think I left it
Which
at
one
the
was
pub.
it? We'll go and buy another one. No, better still. Read some of the biographies of Spinoza. It's always
Really?
better. No. There's a guy called, I'll tell you his name, he's the most important scholar of Spinoza, Stephen Nadler.
Okay.
I met him briefly. He was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And he's got several good, very readable books about the horror story of how he was expelled from the religious community in Amsterdam. It's wonderful stuff.
Interesting.
Wonderful stuff.
I have to get.
Yeah, just get one of the popular books that were written for the general reader.
For sure.
Great story.
Yeah, it's these characters. It's important.
Well, go back to while I'm thinking of it. Bertrand Russell, I mentioned how he was also reviled and rejected, and I said went to jail. Now, these are the great heroes. So there's a kind of a history of independent thinking and the price you pay.
Yeah.
For like Chomsky.
I mean, you could say the same thing about any form of, I suppose, even if you want to call it art, you know how new, whatever's considered new is radical, new musical genres, then they're rejected. I mean, the Ramones, they were called not music for the
Who's
longest.
the Ramones?
Oh, they were just like a punk band from New York in the 70s, and they were regarded as being like absolute trash, like a joke, and then 50 years later they're revered as like the godfathers of punk.
Tell me another group from the 70s that was a punk group.
Iggy Pop, Stooges.
No, you know why I ask?
Yeah.
One of my friends worked in the most prestigious nightclub in New York, and he asked me if I wanted to join him as a kind of a maitre d' or not exactly a bodyguard, but so I went and worked in this nightclub.
All right.
And the most famous punk rock group came in there one night. I met a lot of famous people there.
CBGBs, no.
No, they had a name like that. Think of the name. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
They were
The Beatles, was it?
No. But they're still known
like...
as a group, as a sort of a punk rock group from the 70s.
Okay.
People came in there. I remember meeting the most famous basketball player of the time,
All right.
Wilt Chamberlain, most famous basketballer. It's a long story. But I was like a bouncer there. You know.
Right. Interesting. But yeah, it's like that if you're going to be different, if you're going to...
You're going to meet opposition.
Yeah, if you're going to challenge
but eventually,
any status quo.
I think...
That's the price you pay for thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's true even socially.
But it's so annoying to see, like... sorry, I'm just going to bring my own...
it is.
It's really annoying to see opinions and views out there that will have a massive following. And, you can do that. You can play that game.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. So it's kind of annoying. How do you deal with it at the time?
There's no way. Look, that frustration, if you just watch mainstream television here, it's shocking. It's basically propaganda. I mean, and I'm talking about the ABC and SBS. I'm not talking about commercial stations.
Really?
Yeah. And it depends on where you get your information
commercial
from.
television.
I mean, commercially.
If you think
No, no.
SBS is a bit much.
No, but the paradox is that in the US and elsewhere, you've got to know. See, the trouble is when you say this, reasonably people will ask, how do you know where to find out anything? Well, that's a tough question to answer. How you
That's true.
go to what resources you think are useful or telling the truth. That's, I mean, it's a hard one to decide. But look, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I take to be the trustworthy sources.
What is that? Do you like Democracy Now?
Yeah, Democracy Now! Is good. Yeah, Amy Goodman, and they're very good.
Yep.
Very good. So there's a handful of resources.
Yeah, is there any other like information source that you use regularly?
Yeah, I use
Is there
a
any
lot.
particular newspaper or channel?
Yeah, there are
that
some
you-
journalists that I follow, but there are some commentators that are worth listening to. You know, there's Max Blumenthal, for example, a journalist who's written a lot about these sorts of things. There's look, you know, here's the paradox about this. My son is always annoyed when I quote them, but even the most right-wing commentators in America are doing better than our ABC. Piers Morgan, for example, he's an idiot. But, you know, he puts on long-form interviews with good people. He'll have, Jeffrey Sachs or the Iranian professor Mohammad Marandi. He'll give them an enormous amount of airtime. Now, he pushes back and he says he's stupid stuff, but that's good. And he gives them time. Now,
Yes.
he's not himself, I think, a great, measure of anything, but he, and so's the other one, what's his name, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's a right-wing lunatic. I mean, really, he was, but he actually has got long interviews with people, and he's saying stuff, or at least giving airtime to views that the people that are worth taking seriously.
Right.
You don't see that. The ABC never interviews, any of the Jeffrey Sachs, for example. Why? Jeffrey Sachs is saying some pretty shocking stuff about Ukraine, for example, what that's all about. It's not a view you ever hear on the ABC.
Right.
I think it's also because Piers Morgan he's from British tabloid.
Yeah, that's right.
He understands how to get views really well. He's one of those people who has sold his soul. He is
Yeah.
really good at it. In fact, it's
understands
almost inspiring how good he is at it. But so what he's figured out is that giving these kinds of voices airtime also means views. A lot more people will watch it.
Well, I wish the ABC would work that out.
Well, but ABC's business model isn't that. They don't care about views. They would rather, all they care about is appeasing the government and the current status quo because they're petrified of losing their jobs.
Well, that and losing the funding, which they have lost.
Yeah, which they have lost anyway.
I remember years ago, I wrote about this during the Gulf War, I guess it was, when Bob Hawke was Prime Minister. They had an interviewer. Now, every night they would have a kind of a commentator. He was talking about what was going on in Iraq, an academic. And Bob Hawke didn't like what he was saying, and he blew his stack, and he was threatening to cut the funding from the ABC. So, they learned their lesson from that. You can't
Bob
step
Hawke, really?
Oh, yeah. Surprise.
Wait, wasn't Bob Hawke?
Yeah, because most of the people that you're talking to are big fans of Labour.
Yeah, but
So
Labour's
when you say like Bob Hawke, they think Bob Hawke was a champ.
No, he wasn't, and none of the leaders were. No, I think it's a mistake to think of Labour as the kind of the truth and the.
Right.
I think the idea is like in a binary, who are you going to pick?
Well, that's the problem. But there's the Greens,
You like the Greens?
of course.
But everything about
Well, not
Greens?
everything, but it's
I liked
relatively.
Bob Brown. I think that they've been kind of hijacked by kind of. I think they peddle in
Watermelon.
outrage. Not exclusively.
Come on, you and I have got a big argument here. Look, there's a lot of reason to be outraged, for fuck's sake. I mean, what? Yeah, of course they're outraged. No, but look at their policies.
I mean, yeah. But a lot of their policies are undeliverable.
Why?
Like some of them are statistically not possible.
Why? Like what?
I don't know. There's systems in place. I
You're
don't
just
know.
making that up.
Freezing the rent. I think that doesn't work. I don't know.
Yeah, like shutting down fossil fuels. That doesn't work. The world's coming to an end. I mean,
But okay, on that point, actually, this is what
what are you going to do?
No, I mean, look,
This is one of the
I understand what you're saying. I just think.
But this is actually one of my major criticism towards the Greens is actually that the world is coming to an end. We're facing an imminent environmental catastrophe. And instead of focusing and becoming a lobby group for environmentalism, which way they would have maybe been able to have support from both sides of politics, they went into every other issue, which as noble and as correct, and I agree with those issues, it did a disservice to the environmental cause.
I'm not sure I agree with that. Look,
Because in the 80s, environmentalism was sometimes referred to as pollution, but it was a right-wing Republican cause.
Yeah, maybe.
And it was completely
but
given
they get
up.
criticised for what you're saying. When they start to talk about every other issue, they get criticised for only worrying about one issue. And there's a lot
That's
of others.
fine. If for that one issue, it was extremely important if they stayed an environmental lobby group, pressure group. Every time they were asked about something else, the best thing would have been, as much as I have opinions about everything,
They're
this
a
is not
political
a
party in Canberra. You know, you can't ignore all of the other issues that they're responsible
Then
for.
have another party for it.
No.
Like environment is too big of a problem.
We should be more specific. If you want to, we should go through what else they're saying that you think is a mistake in their other policies.
I mean, like I said, I don't think that the other stuff is a mistake. I mean, some I do believe are a mistake.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, like, they should have been detangled from environment.
Well, maybe.
Because now we've made environment into a partisan issue and the world is collapsing.
Yeah.
And maybe the Greens had good intentions, but I would put
for
some
sure.
blame on them.
No. I think they did. What about this argument? So there's been a lot of examples of the Greens, like with housing. I think it was a Labor housing initiative, and the Greens blocked it because they said it wasn't good enough, and the result was much worse.
Yeah, I've heard that. Look, I don't know enough about it, but you're right. People say that they kind of screwed it because what's that phrase? They made the perfect the enemy of the good or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, look, I get that. Maybe that's right. But look, I've got a much simpler view of this. There is no more important issue facing us than the environment. There's just nothing more important than that. And if we're right, the worst scenarios are so scary. I have trouble even taking it seriously. I've got kids. I've got grandkids. You know, it's very hard to take that stuff on board seriously, given how grim it looks. What kind of world they're going to inherit?
No, I understand.
But
That.
you know, there is all of what you're saying is absolutely true, but there are some silver linings. For example, Australia now produces half of its energy from renewables, as opposed to, it's a
We're
huge
selling
number.
gas overseas. We're selling coal. We're selling all sorts of shit.
I understand,
that
but like
makes it
a lot
worse.
of those countries that we were selling to are also going through their own energy
Why are we
transitions
selling
as
this
well.
stuff? Why are we digging it up and selling it? We should stop doing it.
Because we want a good standard of living.
Yeah, no, that's not right. We can have a fine standard of living. We're
But
not
you
a
need
third world country.
transition. You need a
It
transition.
can't be
right?
overnight. You got to admit that.
Well, look, it depends on how serious the emergency is.
Sure.
You know, if you look at the curves of everything and how at some point you just stop fucking around. You've just got to do it. And the cost is much less than the end of the world. It's simple.
I mean, unfortunately, America and I guess China are such big players that Australia is such a tiny.
But that's the excuse they give. And it's a very bad
And also,
excuse.
it's also not true because China is doing
A lot of good stuff.
hell lot more
That's
than the
right.
U.S. on energy
Right,
transition.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Well,
actually
now-
quite
now-
remarkable
now,
how
yeah.
much most of the developing world's energy transition is being aided by China as well
That's
because they're
exactly
selling
right.
them really cheap solar
They're
panels.
moving very fast in the right direction.
right.
I went to China recently, and I can assure you, it would be tough for you to find a car that is not electric.
Really?
How about that? How about
Is that right?
They're so they still use a lot of coal because they have 1 billion and something people, but for every one coal plant that they're now making, they're creating 7 renewable
Amazing,
plants.
amazing.
So there's a lot of positive that unfortunately it's the Americans that are
No, yeah. Well, I mean,
know,
look now for sure.
you have to be honest about that
Yeah,
one.
definitely. I'm not saying like.
Yeah, but we were talking about Australia, and it seems to me that the fact, as you say rightly, they always say we're such a small player. That's such a lame, immoral argument to keep doing bad stuff.
It's just. Don't you think it's a balance between morality and practicality is a balancing
You can
act?
call it practicality. That's like
It's a cop-out?
That's like saying, yeah, we should make more gas chambers because it's profitable. I mean, what kind of argument is that?
No, it's not the same, is it?
Well, I'm making a bad analogy. I get it.
Oh, you mean gas for export energy?
I was talking about the Holocaust.
I was giving you an out, Peter. I was giving you.
I was talking about Nazi Germany.
was
It's really profitable to
I
make more
put in
gas
a
chambers.
massive off ramp for you, and you decided to go the other way.
No, I was trying to be,
no, it's a
a reductio ad absurdum.
no, I get it. I get it. I mean,
get it.
look, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a.
The thing is,
I
we
understand.
largely agree with you
I
on
know you
this.
do.
Like, none of us are saying coal
No, I
is the
get
way
it.
to go.
But these are good arguments to have. You've got to think
of
it
course,
through.
yeah. And we're not. As I said, I think the last time you were here, like I I take pride in getting my mind changed on issues. I'm not like dogmatic.
That makes you
about
unusual
it.
because you're willing to have the argument.
Yeah, of course.
To go back to our problem,
Of course.
I do this a lot, and it's very depressing how difficult it is to shift people.
It is.
Without anything.
It is.
I've tried a lot with goodwill with old friends, and I'm sad to discover that it really is impossible.
Really?
I never came. I spent a lot of time with old friends, and we disagree, and we give each other articles, and we're starting off in the best possible situation. We like each other. We're old friends, and it just doesn't get anywhere.
Really?
I had this experience with a guy. He wasn't an old friend, but we became friends, and we sort of liked each other, and we respected each other. We met regularly for lunch, and we'd read articles. At one point, I said to him, his name was also Peter. He was a sophisticated guy. He worked in Canberra as a diplomat, so he's a serious intellectual guy. I said to him, Peter, we're not getting anywhere. One of us is completely wrong about everything. I said that as a joke, but we're not able to, and I do this a lot. I try to engage with one reason. I just lost a friend. We were good friends.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the crux? What were the main issues that...
Israel, what it's doing.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'd imagine you'd have to face a lot of those issues. I mean, you go around in my family, there's a lot of agreement going around, you know what I mean? But
my
I can
family's-
imagine for you it would be a tough gig.
Well, look, I do it because I think
It
it's
applies
important.
for me in my own thing because there's other issues that they disagree with. This just happens to be one that we're in agreement with. But I face the same sort of thing in my own circles as well. But that's a tricky one.
But surely there's a middle ground with those kind of friends. You don't find middle ground where you're like...
What middle ground? There's a genocide. Where's the middle ground?
Oh, no. I'm not saying that's the middle ground. I'm just saying you can be like, well, it has a right to exist. There you go.
Like,
No, it doesn't.
You don't think it should?
Right. That's the.
Let's get deep here.
No. That's the way the argument is always presented, and the defenders of Israel will always say that.
I'm not saying it.
No,
I'm
I know
saying
you're not. No, it's
excuse.
good that you raise that because
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
It's important to hear the way that the argument is presented. You're quite right to raise that.
Yeah.
This is a trick. It's a rhetorical trick. Firstly, we didn't think apartheid South Africa had a right to exist as it currently was then. That's a trick to try to prejudice the argument as though, look, the Zionists and the Jewish community will portray people like me as wanting to destroy Israel. They'll explicitly say this is genocidal. That's bullshit. Look at every rally, at every pro-Palestine advocate that I talk to, they will always say, we're looking for coexistence in a democratic, egalitarian society under international law. If you call that destroying Israel, you're a fucking idiot.
Sure.
That's not destroying this. It's destroying an unjust, apartheid,
sure.
Genocidal regime. You can call that destroying, but this is a rhetorical move, which is just bullshit.
So
it's not fair to say that.
No, yeah.
Because... And I'm talking about the leaders of I quote them I give speeches at rallies. I quote them. The leading people who are being demonized will always say, we want to have coexistence. We want to live in peace under international law and equality. The trouble is the other side doesn't want equality. They're supporting a system, and then they're accusing us of genocide. They're committing genocide, and they say that when we're asking for equality and fairness and justice, that we're the ones that are. This is just a despicable trick to play on people who are explicitly. Look at every rally. I quote them, the leaders, to show. I can name them all. These are the leaders of the Palestine movement who are not talking about destruction. That's a metaphor. They don't use that word. They're wanting justice. They're arguing for international law. The other side is not. And why do they use these terms? Because it works. It works in the mainstream.
So the unanimous opinion is that they want coexistence of two states to
I didn't
exist.
say unanimous. I don't want to be stupid about it.
Sure,
There's probably
sure.
some ratbags.
Sure. Not unanimous, but like
I'm talking about the majority.
The majority.
The majority of the pro-Palestine advocacy movement that counts, the important spokesman.
Yeah.
They're saying what I'm saying. We want international law, justice, equality, coexistence.
Yes. It's a
The
quite
other side isn't saying that.
Yes. No,
Okay.
you're right.
So
It's-
why accuse us of wanting to destroy everybody? They talk that way. They want to say we want to push all the Jews into the sea. It's bullshit. And it's despicable to be playing that card when it's just not true. I mean, I'm just repeating myself, but the reason I quote these people every time I publish something or at a rally, so that it's on the record. And they're I can name the people that are the leading spokesmen, including the Jews. but certainly the Palestinians, the ones that are most demonized. Look at what's happening to Rand Abdel Fattah, one of the most heroic, wonderfully decent, deep thinkers and important
Was
spokespersons.
she the one who was supposed to speak at Adelaide?
Yeah, they cancelled her.
Yes.
She's articulate, she's smart, and she says all the insightful, decent things. And because she's so clear in her moral vision, of course they pick on her or pick on, there's a court case now about Mary Kostakidis, They pick on the prominent, articulate spokesman to try to pull them down.
Yeah, they'll pick on you too if you start getting the numbers. They've already picked on you. You got cancelled as well
I have
for saying something at a rally, which I'm not going to get into.
But look, I'm proud of it because, again, I must be doing something right. And what I say is open for the public. It's easy to see whether it's defensible.
I was definitely kind of naive personally in terms of, at least when they announced the ceasefire, that, I was like, well, this hopefully is a ceasefire and there will be grounds to start to rebuild what you're talking about, and just having kept sort of an eye on the developments. It's like there's still...
What ceasefire? They've killed 500 people since the ceasefire.
Exactly.
The place is unlivable.
Yeah.
Well, you've seen pictures of what...
Yeah. It's like now
no Palestinians are being consulted in this new fucking peace, whatever it is, peace committee or whatever. It's just the most insane...
It's quite obvious now. I think that, like... Yeah.
Who can support this? And where's our government to get back to Albanese and Wong?
Well, they haven't signed up. Okay, well, here's a good point. There's a lot of countries that signed up for the peace board. Albanese refused.
Did he refuse?
He didn't refuse. He said we're still considering it, but we have reservations.
Yeah, right.
What? So they didn't sign up for it?
I'm not giving him any credit for it.
Okay,
he recognized the Palestinian state.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, he did that too?
Yeah, that's right.
You got to understand, in the ecosystem that he lives in, this is a very difficult thing that he did.
He does the minimum just so that he can say what he says. But, at the rallies, they rightly are very angry with Albanese and Wong for doing fuck all. And
I have been told by certain reputable sources that Albanese in his uni days was a big palace.
Listen, when I got outside his office for one of the rallies, the protest rallies outside his office, I quoted what he used to say in Parliament before he was Prime Minister. Yeah. He would have said the things I'm saying. That tells you a lot about him. What a I don't know.
Actually, that
what does it tell you about him? Where he knows, you see, not like
he's playing the game. He's playing the political game.
It's worse than that. It's not like some right-wing loony who believes shit, and Albanese knows better. That makes it worse morally. You know what that's like? I always think of the example.
You don't believe in relativism at all. You are a fan of Socrates. You don't understand. Okay, for us and for as a university professor, there's a lot of things that you can push the envelope for. But if you're the Prime Minister of Australia, there's there's only limited room
that's
that you can maneuver.
I don't buy that. Look,
really?
It's a moral. Look, how bad does a genocide get before you decide, look, fuck it,
well, he's not committing the genocide.
I didn't say he's committing it.
Yeah.
He's not saying anything. He's not saying anything. Well, anything.
Sure.
He's watching it go, look at the record. No, there's no... And even if it would be the cost of his job, you don't watch people going... Look, I always pick the Holocaust as an example because it heightens the point. How many people have to go to the gas chamber before you say, look, I'm just not going to... I'm going to say something. He gets no credit for biting his tongue because the Americans and the Israelis... Look, he invited out the president of Israel to pander to the Jews in Australia to make them feel better.
He is also Jewish, just so you know.
Yeah, so you know, I'm allowed to be rude because I'm a Jew.
Yeah, because I don't want to get a lot of you guys. He can say it because he is.
What did you? Obviously, it was horrible. But what did you think? Yeah. The terrorist attack.
It's a shocking atrocity.
Yeah,
it was a terrible terrorist attack.
Yeah,
there's no question about the horror.
No, I know that.
But look at how it's being exploited.
Do you think it's been politicized and exploited a lot?
Just read the commentary on it. Are you joking? I mean,
my argument is it's inherently political.
Of course it is. What is?
The act.
Of course it is. We don't know enough about who he is and why he did it. I'm not talking about that.
Sure.
I'm talking about the way in which the government and, of course, the supporters of Israel have been wringing from it. And there's a lot of articles about it. I'm not the only one saying this, fortunately.
Sure, yeah.
It's being exploited to the hilt. And the fact that the Prime Minister... What has Israel got to do with it? Why would you bring, this is confirming, you see, we're told not to conflate criticism of Israel with criticism of Jews. And now when a bunch of Jews get massacred in a horrible terrorist act, you invite the president of Israel out? What does that prove? It proves that the conflation, and you've got to read what the Jewish press is saying. They are not allowing us to make the distinction. They want to embrace Israel as though that's, look, it's very hard.
But it was the same Labor government that refused a visa to a Knesset member who was like and then they recently refused visa to an Israeli influencer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Who's had
so they do these half measures.
But you got to understand, like, how would you refuse the visa of an ex-Israeli prime minister?
You don't invite him.
Well, I think even he's
Why would
not.
you
I don't think
invite him?
Albanese invited him. It would have been some Jewish society that would have
Well,
invited
you wouldn't
him.
let him in the country.
It's
It's easier said than done, though.
But it depends on how seriously you take the crimes that he's guilty of, and the country. He personally has been cited for his role in this. He's not the prime minister, but he's got. If you look at the legal, there's legal action being taken here against him. I mean, there's Robert Richter and a number of other significant people are now looking at the reasons why he should be prevented from coming here. I mean, but look, it's a simple moral question. The country that he represents, I mean, it's doing the worst thing we've seen in recent times. How would you, and by the way, I'm making a slightly different point. Why would you invite the leader of Israel to console the Jewish community? That's confirming that the Jewish community and Jews are somehow up to their necks with Israel.
Yeah, I get that. I understand what you're
now,
saying.
there are, fortunately in Australia now, a very significant group of Jews that are saying, no, the phrase not in my name. But now the Prime Minister is making it what they're doing in your name because he's inviting this guy out to console them. Why do you have to... Look, a lot of Jews disavow the connection with Israel. In America, there are thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews that say what I'm saying, this is a travesty. It's a violation of all of the Jewish principles. Israel doesn't represent the Jews that these Jews are saying. Hundreds of thousands of them. That's a view that should be taken more seriously.
But you also have to understand if let's say he refuses a visa to this Israeli based on the fact that he represents Israel, which is doing, do you know how many countries are doing illegal things in the world? Like, how are we going to... So then the next time some other country, let's say there's a leader from Saudi Arabia coming, then all of that will be... This is going to be a never-ending process.
Yeah, that's the world. So what, you should go along with bad stuff and encourage war crimes because
you shouldn't
everybody else
encourage it, but you have to understand that, like, in diplomatic service, you're going to have to talk to people that you don't like.
It's
and
not
the
about
idea of
talking to
blanket
him.
ban...
I'm not talking about talking to him. I'm talking about inviting him into the country to console the Jewish community.
Who the Jewish community have asked for.
Well, they shouldn't get what they asked for. And by the way, that's telling you exactly what I'm saying. That's very problematic. How come now this is actually making it worse because the Jewish community is inviting out the head of Israel. That's telling you that they are up to their necks in the crimes of the state of Israel. That's telling you that. They're confirming it. And that's why the Jewish Council of Australia and other Jews are saying, wait a minute, we're good Jews and we're not supporting this. So now there's a significant group of Jews in Australia, as around the world, in America, they're wanting to make that distinction. The Zionists are not letting you make the distinction, and now the Prime Minister is not letting you make the distinction. Jews want to say, we're Jews, we've got nothing to do with Israel. That's what I'm quoting now, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro in America. He's very articulate about this. Jews are a religious community. They have religious commitments and beliefs. What's it got to do with a state? He puts
the distinction is important, I agree.
It's not. It's vital.
Yeah.
Being a Jew has got nothing to do with Israel.
Yeah.
Being a Jew, because there are Jews all over the world that are, and that's like being, I don't know, a Christian. It's got nothing to do with
where you live.
But I would like to say there's a lot of Jews that disagree with that.
Mostly they disagree.
They
You're right.
believe that is...
Right.
That's the problem. You're 100% right.
And so you have to... Now, that ideology you might not agree with, but they believe that, so they should be allowed to invite someone that represents their views. No, they shouldn't be allowed.
The country has other motives and other principles. They should be told or educated into understanding that they should be able... See, you're raising a very important point. They should be more sensitive to distinguishing their Jewishness from a Zionist project. Israel is built on conflating those two. The reality is that Israel was a crime from the beginning to the end. The founding of the State of Israel was a crime. It was born in sin. It was born in the expulsion.
Just as Australia was, or the United States was.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's a settler colonial regime, and the crimes were horrible. Now, we don't have to go back into history, but it's relevant to say the State of Israel, it claims to represent the Jews, but Jews should repudiate that, because that's why the rabbis in New York and the others say, we're religious Jews. We follow the Torah, and it's got nothing to do with a state, because there are Jews all over the place. They're first and foremost American Jews. They're Australian Jews. It's very interesting how hard it is to make this clear, because the Jews don't want to distinguish it, and you're quite right. But that's the problem. So now Jews are being implicated in the crimes of the State of Israel. Why? They should repudiate it. And by the way, this is going to blow back on them. You know, where does anti-Semitism come from? You know, the explosion of anti-Semitism in this country, I have to be careful how I say this.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with how you say this.
Oh, God.
You do have to be
I'm being very careful, but it's important.
Again,
But it's important. Yeah, there's been a lot. But the question is, how much of it is, let me put it differently. If they were Buddhists doing it, you'd be pissed off with them. If Buddhists are supporting a genocide, what would you say about them? Now, of course, the question is, why in this country?
Okay, not all Buddhists, but there is a genocide in Myanmar.
No, I get it.
With the Rohingya, and a lot of Buddhists do support it.
Okay.
You know?
Look, what
Not
I'm
all
trying to do,
Buddhists,
I'm trying to clarify something. I'm trying to say the reaction against Jews today in Australia, firstly, a lot of those incidents were fake. They weren't real anti-Semitism. They were some kind of fake.
This is where you have to be careful.
I'm being careful. I'm telling you what is now not controversial.
I am in no position to tell you how to speak, sir. This is your community and everything.
No, I'm just reporting now what has become public knowledge. A lot of these graffitis and so on, they were done by people that truckload of explosives. This was not clear, but they weren't. Let me rephrase my question or my statement. I grew up in this country, and I've asked a lot of people my age, have we ever seen anti-Semitism in this country? Well, you could mention a couple of cases, like the Royal Sydney Golf Club apparently didn't allow Jews to join. There was that. Okay. But, you know, my parents came out from the Holocaust, and I grew up with that history. I know anti-Semitism when I see it. I've grown up with my parents' stories. It's not like I would miss it. So I'm asking a lot of Jews and non-Jews, did you ever experience anti-Semitism growing up here? I don't say it's zero, but it's close to zero. Now, that's relevant. So what happened after October 7th? This explosion, the Executive Council of Australian jury is going around listing everything that's going. Suddenly, anti-Semitism exploded. Okay, let's say there's some real cases of hatred of Jews. Let's say, why would you hate Jews today, only after October the 7th, 2023? What are they angry with the Jews about? What?
I have no idea what you're talking about, sir.
I know how to answer it. How do you feel about a group of people that's supporting a genocide? That's a relevant question.
Not for this podcast. This is too red hot, sir.
You don't want to answer that question.
No, sir. Nobody does over here. Let's go back to Plato.
No.
I'm with you.
I mean, there's a lot of now actually right-wing media in America that is influencing they're peddling a lot of conspiracy theories about Jewish people. That there is, I know of a case where it was a young man that was taking that media in, and that was he was like abused someone, and it was like an anti-Semitic thing.
I'm sure there's anti-Semitism, but look, I don't want to labour the point. It's an awkward, but
I understand.
But I'm saying it because it's important.
I mean, look, it's the heavy, deep, like confronting questions. Really, it's kind of like the power of government and the media, and how the influence of that and what that can.
All of that, but we need to find a way out of this at the moment, and it's. I don't think we're helping.
I don't know where a way out of it is, really.
Can we talk about?
I think history will eventually judge this time period.
Yeah, but that's we can't wait that long. I mean, we got to make things better now. What I'm talking about, the reason I'm saying,
we are powerless. We can't make things better.
Powerless. We're not powerless. We're talking to each other. People are listening to us. We're talking to other people. That's what we can do. That's what we all do. I spend my whole life arguing with people. Why? Well, you can choose to not think about it. I mean, I wish I could. But it's like when we were in the middle of the Vietnam War. You pick a crisis. This is pretty serious. And I think with a minimum of decency and honesty, we have to try to confront what are clearly difficult questions And I know this is a hot, difficult topic, but I mean, I make an effort. Look, I try to talk to the Jews as best I can in my community. Not everybody wants to talk to me, some do. But we've got a responsibility. I mean, you can't avoid that. And Jews in particular, in this case, have a serious responsibility. So that's why, let me repeat myself, there are the Jewish Council of Australia and various others, they're saying essentially what I'm saying. They're saying, we are Jews, we're good Jews, and we are not allowing this to be done on our behalf. They're protesting because that's the way it's been done. That's the way it's been presented. Well, that's sort of obvious in a way. You know, a state is a state, and they shouldn't be claiming to be doing it for other people who have nothing to do with them.
How do you think something like that terrorist attack can be curbed? Do you think it's an issue? It's a education thing, immigration thing, or it's just rogue people do murder people sometimes? You know,
Terrorists?
Yeah.
Look, it's not too difficult to answer that question. There will be a minority of people who will take extreme action because they're angry and pissed off, and they'll do some terrible thing.
Do you think did they act in what they saw as retribution?
We don't know exactly.
Yeah.
We're making it up. We have to, but I'm talking more generally, where you are provoking extremists to take things into their own hands. It's not hard to think through why some people would go to extremes out of political anger. I mean, that's the most plausible.
I think that there is a case for an argument for the case that, like, I think the dad was like pretty much not doing well in life. Like, I think he was living.
Sure, there will always be personal, weird reasons.
Yeah.
But
So what I'm saying is, I think that in this case, I could be wrong, but it seems like it was, quite often for terrorist acts, it's like there's a political sort of. It's usually a personal grievance. It's usually,
but not always. Let me take it out of this particular conversation. Let's go to a place where there's a lot of literature. There was a book written by the academic Robert Pape. He wrote about terrorism some years ago. He investigated every act of terrorism in the world.
Right.
Now that's important to look at.
Yeah,
as an example.
No, definitely. Yeah.
They're terrorism. They're acts of violence against civilians and whatever. And
there's commonalities.
Yeah, no, but the motivations of people are interesting. And he picked the Tamil Tigers as an example. Now, they were Hindus, but they were it wasn't Hinduism that was driving it to it. They had political grievances, and probably just grievances. They were resorting to terrorism. Now, listen, let's go back. I picked a lot of examples. You can think in history where what you call terrorism is resistance. It's a fight against oppression. Okay, so
in many times and in most cases, particularly the Tamil Tigers cases, but not always.
No, not always. Not always. It's interesting to look at those cases. But you are right.
In majority of the cases, that is
they've got political motives.
Yes.
Even Bin Laden. There was a famous interview with Bin Laden where, we're picking a case where he did a terrible, if it's true, act of terrorism. He was interviewed by Robert Fisk, and he held up a book, I think it was by the book called Rogue State by Bloom. And Rogue State listed all of the crimes of the United States, and especially against, and he was interviewed by Robert Fisk. And Robert Fisk, when you go back and look at what was his grievances, we weren't allowed to ask that question. In America after September 11 in 2001, you weren't allowed to ask what might have been the causes of it. These were taboo. But
and that is something that.
But his causes were so numerous. Part of it was he was upset at the environmental catastrophe.
Well, probably for good reason.
The U.S. was. So he had
justifiable grievances.
Some of them were justifiable.
That's not. Notice. Let me just make an important distinction. To explain someone's motives is not to justify it or endorse it.
Sure.
No. I'm not.
I have to say that because whenever I'm explaining the motives of your point is an important one.
Yeah.
There are crazies that will do things, but there are drivers that are important to understand, and we're not allowed to ask that question. It's kind of taboo.
I completely understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. There are some genuine grievances, but that worldview that Bin Laden came from, there's a lot of completely fake grievances as well. And I think, and this is my opinion, this is a whole new topic, but I think the problem over there isn't they have the wrong information or the grievances. It's the methodology that they use to come. I'm talking about like the terrorists and their motivations.
Which ones?
Bin Laden, in this case, Al-Qaeda. So their educational head being Zawahiri. So I think the main problem with them wasn't necessarily that they came up with some wrong kind of truth,
but we use
but
the
they
word
came
terrorism.
up with the wrong methodology of coming to
Of
answers
course,
for their
I don't think
right.
blowing up, but there are other cases where look, violence of certain kinds is reactive violence, and we use the word terrorism very selectively for what they do against us. And the fact of the matter is, again, I'm going to quote Chomsky, who's committed more terrorism in the world since the Second World War than any other group? It's the United States. It's clear. I mean, they've gone around with all their proxies and everybody else. You can pick, Chile, or you could pick, I don't know, any number of countries.
I mean, it's a mainstream opinion now. It's not even a
That's right.
controversial
So it's not
thing.
so radical, but it's not even. But the word terrorism is used very carefully, selectively.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to go back to the Israel-Palestine thing. How was Israel founded? The worst terrorism. They were criminal. The ones that became presidents of prime ministers of Israel, Begin, Shamir, they were wanted terrorists. They blew up the hotel, the King David Hotel. They were assassinating
A lot of people would have no idea what you're talking
know they
about,
don't.
and I have been too afraid to even mention this, but would you like to give a little historical account of exactly
well, look,
what
I'm
you're
just
talking
saying
about?
that the word terrorism, we're not allowed to talk about the founders of the State of Israel. They were, on anybody's definition, brutal terrorists. They were killing civilians. They were blowing up hotels. They were doing shit. And they were on the British wanted list as outright terrorists. They didn't hide this. It wasn't a secret. And I'm talking about the ones that became prime ministers.
Yes.
There's just no question. If you're going to describe bin Laden as a terrorist, if you define what you mean by terrorism, now that's why I leave that part of the world aside. America and what it's been responsible for in East Timor or in most of Latin America, which regimes did we support in Latin America? The most brutal terror regimes that were torturing people to death. There are famous cases of what was his name? In Uruguay.
Oh, Uruguay.
There was an American policeman down there. They assassinated him, the terrorists, the Tupamaros or whoever they were called. They kidnapped him, and he was torturing people to death with American support. In Iran, who was supporting the Shah and his torturing the Slezak secret police with the Americans. The history is sorted out.
Shah was doing that?
Under the Shah, yeah. The Slezak secret police.
Right.
You know where I learned all this? When I first read Chomsky.
Yeah.
You read Chomsky's book years ago called The Washington Connection and Third World Fascism. And he listed all of the terror regimes in the world and who was behind them all. What we were. I mean, Americans were. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and including bin Laden.
Well, of course. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
let's
there's
not
all of
forget
that.
the
There's that
OG.
history too.
There's that history
That's
too.
right, that's right.
Yeah.
They were
It's
created.
a very ugly story
It's
that we were behind. It's not a nice. When you read that stuff, it leads you down a certain path, and that's where I am now. you know.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean,
We're not the
is-
good guys. Is basically the story.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't-
I think that's actually one of, in my view, the great crisis for today, which is not only that all of these bad things were done, but the awareness amongst all of the Western population that, like, are we even the good guys?
No, but you got it. You put your finger on it. So this is the. Forgive me. I'm always talking about Chomsky. So Chomsky also has written a great deal about what would you call our propaganda system. He's got this whole stuff in a book and a documentary film, which is very good, called The Manufacturing of Consent.
Yeah.
You got to watch this documentary.
I've seen it. I think you've seen it too.
I've read the book, yeah.
Well, the documentary is good.
I've seen the documentary.
It's great. I've just sent it to somebody. It's a nice overview of the system of propaganda, which the free press is responsible for brainwashing us. And that's part of the problem, that we're not allowed to see. For me, it was a revelation, what I'm telling you about what we're doing around the world. Most people don't know it. If you watch the mainstream responsible press, Chomsky's very clever when he talks about it, because people don't believe that these are propaganda instruments. They think it's the free press. It's an illusion.
They know now.
No, they
A
don't.
lot of them do.
No, they don't. I don't think they do.
They either want their own version of the propaganda to succeed, but a lot of them are
Maybe,
now
but they don't
aware.
know who to turn to. The question we asked
Well,
before.
they turned to people like Trump. Like, this is one of the
That's right.
symptoms
That's the
of
problem.
it.
That's right.
Is you had your faith in judiciary, Congress, the executive branch. All of them have record low approval. Like, to the point, it's a joke now. It's 5%, 3% in some cases. how can your society function like that?
Yeah, but your question, I'm thinking about who do you turn to get information from? That's tough now. Where do you get reliable information? Well, I can give you my list of people that over years I've come to trust. But for the ordinary person, it's not easy to figure it out.
I'll tell you what it is. It's this podcast.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen at home.
Sometimes.
Or at least you'll get a variety of opinions. Or you won't just get hacks. But
dissident opinions.
We are over time, Peter.
Oh.
Thank you so much for coming to this podcast. We really enjoyed it. Like
I appreciate
always.
the chance to say what I say.
And you also provide me, at least, with a moral compass whenever I start thinking of,
censoring yourself.
Not censoring, but like relativist ideas that everything is relative. You always bring me back to that Socrates view. Was like, no, it's objective.
Well,
face it. So, yeah.
That's a whole lecture in the philosophy of science. What's objectivity?
So that's part 3
of
our
story.
podcast.
Awesome. That'll be
Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you everyone at home that watched this podcast. We will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.